Welcome back to Purrfect Takes. I'm your host, Stephen Patton, joined as always by my co-host and dear friend, Jacob LaQuire. And today is a day after the first game in the Western Conference Finals, and Wemby dropped 41 points, 24 boards, and a win in double overtime against the reigning champs, Oklahoma City Thunder. This is pretty impressive. He looks like the generational prospect he was touted to be after guys like Shaquille O'Neal, LeBron James. I think you would argue maybe an Anthony Davis. And he has really lived up to the hype. And so as a football podcast, Jacob, I want to kind of turn this question over to you. Who over the past 10 years, as being our draft expert, would you put in the generational category? And I think if we limit this to quarterbacks, it does it a disservice. Obviously, the guys that were just mentioned were the first overall picks. But I think if we look across the entire league, across all positions, who in your mind are the almost like undoubtedly generational prospects at their respective positions?
Even with the quarterbacks, I think you could. Trevor Lawrence at the time was in there, but I don't know if he's the Andrew Luck player that generational quarterback should build to be. Caleb Williams wasn't there for as much as people want to say that he was. I don't think like Bryce Young wasn't there, Williams wasn't there. Who are Cam Ward and Mendoza aren't there, and even going back to who was Kyler and Baker, they're not there. But within the last decade, I think we can start with Myles Garrett. Um, Fast track to already being on the defensive end Mount Rushmore, edge rusher Mount Rushmore, right? Sack record in a single season, on pace to, if he has five or six more years, he can break the total record. So I would say him. The other guy that I was thinking about two more. I thought about Quentin Nelson over the last decade, a guard that goes, I think he went sixth overall because of his pedigree at Notre Dame. And then more recently, a generational prospect that I thought about was Brock Bowers. I think he's the perfect tight end prospect. I think, frankly, there haven't been any tight end prospects close to him. I know he went 13th, and players like Colston Loveland have gone 10th, but those were different draft classes. Bowers, to me, has zero flaws to his game outside of maybe injury concerns. He was the best player on a Georgia team that won back-to-back national titles. He started as a true freshman and was their number one receiving option on a team with George Pickens, Lad McConkey, A.D. Mitchell. Jermaine Burton was on that team. He transferred to Alabama after that year. I think Bowers was a generational tight end prospect, and I think that obviously Myles Garrett was generational over the past decade.
It's unfortunate. One's on the Cleveland Browns, the other is on the Las Vegas Raiders, which they may be able to turn their luck around with Fernando Mendoza moving forward. We'll see. I think if we were to add a couple other prospects, I'd throw out a Saquon Barkley in 2018.
Yeah.
And it's hard. It is just hard to bypass how talented. I think it was the 2021 draft where you
Oh,
had
yeah.
Penny Sewell and Jamar Chase go kind of like 5 and 6. And it was like the only reason they didn't go higher is because I think there was like a quarterback that draft that got taken one. And then you had a few
Well, there
other.
was Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, Trey
That's right.
Lance were the top
Of the
three.
top three. And then it was
Then you
Kyle
had Kyle
Pitts.
Pitts, who generational athlete at the position. Maybe not overall tight end player, but then yeah, Jamar Chase and Penny Sewell. Then the next year, you could throw Derek Stingley into that kind of tier. Both he and Chase took years off and had nothing to prove um, at the COVID, like with the COVID year and stuff. So there's certainly a big, robust group in that next tier. But I think Garrett and Bowers, and I would say Quentin Nelson, they kind of stand alone for me with that generational billing.
Yeah, and that's all to say that like when that term gets thrown around, like first off, there's only like we listed what 5, 6 players probably in total there over a
Yeah,
10-year span.
and across different positions too.
Yeah, you got like 22 different positions we're talking about. And it was like a guard, an edge rusher, maybe a tackle, depending on how you view Penny Sewell. And he is going back to the left side where he played at Oregon. So maybe he's able to pull off like a Tristan Wirfs a couple years ago. And it's just like if you continue to dominate the way those guys have, like maybe there's an argument. But again, like 5 or 6 guys over 10 years, like when you hear that term almost get thrown around every draft cycle, it gets exhausting. And so
Hmm.
again, last night was a reminder of like, what does that generational like player look like? And Wemby is the encompassment, the embodiment of that. And I think this past year, like you said, Miles Garrett is probably the best example in the NFL. Today, we get to talk about what got released last Thursday, and that was the NFL schedule. And we have a couple superlatives to kind of go through different scenarios to talk about games that are on the schedule because any Panthers fan can Google the schedule, see who we're playing, look at some of the odds against some of the teams we're playing, and have a rough idea of how the season may go. But Jacob, I want to turn this over to you. We have 17 games on the schedule. Who do you think is the most likely for us to upset? We just won the NFC South, so we play a lot of division winners across the NFL. We play a couple tough divisions as well. Who seems to be the big honcho that we can knock off after beating teams like the Packers in Lambeau this past year, beating the Rams at home, and almost doing it again in the wild card round?
So we have a very interesting schedule. If you recall last year, we had a week 14 bye week. That's the latest you can have, which if you're gearing up for a playoff run, it's kind of helpful, right? To have a rest there a month before the season ends. This year we have the earliest possible bye week in week 5, so the exact opposite. So we get an early rest, but following that week, this team is going to go up to the link to play the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles are projected, or they're 6.5 point favorites at this point, and that's a pretty significant spread. I think the Panthers have a pretty good advantage against Philly here, and so they're going to be my team to upset pick for a few reasons. Number one, we don't know if AJ Brown is going to be on the team at this point. I've kind of accepted that he's not going to be. That trade's been talked about so much, and so you're left with Devontae Smith, who I think is a very capable receiver one, and Mekhi Lemon, who is a rookie, as your two primary receiving options. We are also coming off of a bye week, right? So we have a 7-day rest advantage. The Eagles don't have their bye until week 8, I think. And then the Eagles also are playing in London in week 5. So not only do we have a week's rest, they have to come back from across the ocean, deal with jet lag. They're professionals. Maybe they'll have it out of their systems by then. But I think the rest advantage, the potential loss of a Pro Bowl caliber player on their offense. And hopefully by this point, Brad Idzik and Bryce Young have gelled with the new way that the offense is being called through the first month of the season. I think this is a prime opportunity for Carolina to pull an upset.
I like it because of the last time the Panthers played in the link, the how close we were with the roster we had then, and I think it's
Yeah. And that was a
very
Super Bowl winning Eagles team.
yeah, I would argue that Philadelphia Eagles roster is better than the one that they're going to roll out this fall. So it's like if you as a team have gotten better, Evero knows kind of how to thwart Jalen Hurts. They could be dealing with the loss of AJ Brown, and I think that's something that's going to take like half a season to kind of get into any sort of rhythm. And I think if our defense is healthy that early on, that's a big mismatch right there. And on offense, all you're asking for is to not make mistakes. Just take the opportunities that are there. And I feel like Dave Canales had a really good game plan against Vic Fangio the last go round to where he might be able to duplicate something along that as well. For me, I'm going to go right before the bye week. And our threshold for this category was, hey, it's got to be a +3 or higher spread to be, I guess, considered an upset. And when you consider home field is pretty much baked into this like spread, I think when we host the Detroit Lions on Sunday Night Football in Week 4, that's an opportunity to make a statement across the league. Like we're really that team. And I think what's interesting is the Detroit Lions over the past couple of years, their identity has been like, hey, we can pound the rock, you can know what's coming, and we're just going to run it down your throat. And I feel like that's the statement we can make with the offensive line. We've kind of retooled and rebuilt this offseason. And you have Chuba Hubbard in the lineup. You have Jonathan Brooks in the lineup. Chuba Hubbard was part of that, I believe, 300-yard rushing kind of performance against the Lions a few years back in December. And I feel like that's something that can be duplicated in week 4 on prime time. And we'll see. We'll see. But that's the upset that I'm leaning for right before the bye week. You have the Eagles. On the opposite end of this, who do you see on the schedule as a potential trap game? So we talked about teams that we could upset that are favored against us. Who do you think we might slip against that we may be favored going into?
Well, I like the Lions shout, first of all. We have 3 primetime games this year, which I feel we should make note of. We only had 1 last year, 0 before that, so we're getting there, right? And, the last time Carolina hosted Sunday Night Football, can you guess what year that was?
It was it 2018?
It was 2015, all the way
Really?
back. The last time we hosted it, we beat the
Oh,
Eagles.
hosted it. Okay.
Yeah,
That's what I was
and
like. I felt
we
like we had a
played on
Sunday night.
Sunday night the following year, I think against the Seahawks, where they kinda demolished us, so hopefully we get the host buff there. But the team that we could, be upset against, a trap game, if you will, I'm gonna keep it early in the season as we've been doing. The Cleveland Browns are a team that I think most teams look at and think that's an easy win on the schedule. I think their roster has improved a ton over the past couple of years. And if we go back to 2022, our week 1 game was against the Browns, and a lot of people thought Carolina would win that, but rookie tackle Ikem Ekwonu had to deal with Myles Garrett. If Monroe Freeling wins the job, he'll have to deal with Myles Garrett, somebody we were just talking about as generational. Early on in the season, week 3, it's in Cleveland. Panthers weren't great on the road last year. I don't think that they're going to be a great team, but I think if they can figure just a little bit out at the quarterback position, and I think that if Todd Munkin can get some energy in that offense, they could upset us in their home stadium. So it would be a road upset for Carolina.
That would definitely be one where you're looking at the schedule where it's like you want to pencil that game in as a win, and we very well could just go into Cleveland and lay a dud. Fingers crossed, you have a game plan against one of the best defensive players, if not the best defensive player. Uh, you're able to nullify him. I think you could probably get some things to work to where you're able to eke out a win. But again, anything can happen any given Sunday. That's what makes the NFL so fun. And a team that always seems to kind of win when they're not supposed to and lose when they're supposed to win, and reference the trap games, are the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I could see them kind of going on a slide at the end of the year, and the Panthers look like a potential playoff team down the stretch. And that's one of those situations where you're favored going into Pittsburgh. They don't look like they belong, and they somehow pull out the game. And that's, I think, going down the stretch, the Steelers are currently favored because they're at home. They are a better quote unquote roster on paper, to where that plus 3.5 looks a little daunting to say it's a trap game. But I think by time the end of the season rolls around, the Panthers could be favored going into Pittsburgh. And that's one of those that you just have to be buckled in and prepared for really what they have to bring to the table, and treat them like any other team on the schedule. And that's with respect, because if the second you kind of dismiss a team, you've already lost.
Yeah, they just got Rodgers as well. He did sign there, so he and new head coach Mike McCarthy are running it back one more time.
But
They
imagine Drew Allar or Will Howard is the starter for whatever reason. Rodgers goes down like week 10. That's where like the spread could totally switch to
right,
the
right.
Panthers' favor. And it's like they could just win an ugly game because that's Steelers football. And it's just you have to be mindful of that, especially in December.
They also improved their receiving room or receiver room quite a bit, and I think that was their key weakness last year. So you can never count out a Steelers team. Now, throughout most of my entire life, Mike Tomlin's been the guy at the helm. So I wonder how McCarthy's going to have that team fighting late in the season. But we'll have to see. He did a decent job with Dallas, or a good job in the regular season. But once we got to the playoffs, hit or miss there.
Yeah, and again, we'll see what McCarthy brings to the table this year in Pittsburgh. He's obviously had success at his previous 2 stops, but there's been a lot of coaches, they get to that third spot and they just kind of fizzle out. So again, it remains to be seen with the Pittsburgh organization, but they did try to take a little bit of a pivot this offseason. The next question I have is, who is the most likely to be a blowout in terms of the schedule? It could be somebody that's blowing us out. It's a team that we could blow out. I think we both have a game that is kind of penciled in as the obvious one, but I'll let you kind of give your thoughts on this first.
So I'll go in the opposite direction. I'll say which team could really lay a hurting on the Panthers, so that way you can have the obvious win there. Week 9, when we are hosting the Denver Broncos, I know that it's a the Broncos are only favored by 3 points. they're pretty clearly the best roster in football to me. If Bo Nix is back at that point, I'll have more faith in Jarrett Stidham or whoever the backup quarterback is. And I really think they could just come in and crush us, especially now that Jalen Waddle's on the team. This is a very, very good team. And I think that it's a game where you look at and you say, oh, maybe we can catch them lacking. You can't really catch Sean Payton teams lacking. And with the way that they were resilient last year, bringing back games, maybe I cut out there for a second, but I think Denver's gonna get it done.
Yeah, no, I mean Denver is a team coming off the number one seed last year. They're a very well complete team, like you said. The addition of Waddle makes them very dangerous. For me, it's like 2 weeks later, the Baltimore Ravens come into town. Jesse Minter gave Bryce Young fits a couple years ago as the
Yeah.
Chargers DC, and he had less talent to work with than what he's going to be working with in Baltimore. So that's a matchup that I could see them getting out to a very early lead and not letting that back and kind of being one of those signature wins down the stretch for them. For me, I'll go in the opposite direction. Like you said, alluded to the Atlanta Falcons. You talk about the put the cherry on top of the season. I think Atlanta coming to Charlotte in Week 18, that being a statement game right before the postseason, could be the difference between winning or losing the division. I think that game is going to hold a lot of value, and Bryce Young owns that team. So when you talk about a game that I think could be very exciting for the home fans, is a great season finale. That's the one I would pencil in as the kind of belt to ass. I know the meme went around with the 30 on the like leather belt, like one of the AI creations for memes for the Panthers, and that was something that was fun to watch Panthers and Falcons fans go back on last year when we gave them the business here in Charlotte last year.
You could talk about week 2 as well, going to Atlanta. Bryce Young says that he drove to Atlanta to like clear his mind. That's his fortress of solitude. The way Bryce has played in that stadium the past couple years, I think would align with that line of thinking. So I think either of those games, Carolina could get a signature win, let's say.
So like you said, I think that's a good lead into kind of the reverse of this or the opposite of this is that okay, we've talked about games that could get either away from us or get away from our opponent. Which game on the schedule do you think will go down to the wire? That will go down to the last drive, a kicker making a field goal kind of situation. What gives kind of the gut wrenching either win or loss on the schedule for you right now?
So I'm going to go to the only game that is not a 1 p.m. or an 8:15 or 8:20 p.m. game. Week 13 in Minnesota. I think that could be a very, very close game. I know that they didn't make the playoffs last year, but they had a better record than the Panthers last year. And this is a team that was doing it with 9, talking about JJ McCarthy, Max Brosmer, and Carson Wentz at quarterback. Surely Kyler Murray has to be better than those guys, even if it's just a little bit. This offense is going to look a lot better. Brian Flores is doing his thing. We know how good that is. They added a ton of defensive talent in the draft, and they signed Jawan Jennings like a week or two after the draft, and he had a pretty decent day against the Panthers the last time they played. So I think that Minnesota Vikings game is going to come down to the wire. It wouldn't surprise me if the Panthers won or lost that one, but I think it's going to be close.
I like that. It's interesting because like Kevin O'Connell, Brian Flores, like great minds. They obviously have talent to work with. It's like one of those scenarios. Like, is this the year that they win like 13 games? Is this another kind of struggle year as they're kind of transitioning between quarterbacks? So I could see it being a close game. I don't know if that's the one that I would say like goes down to the wire, one that jumps off like kind of right away is like week 10 in New Orleans, knowing what that looked like down in the Bayou last year. But the one I think I'm leaning on is our home game against the Cincinnati Bengals. A
Mm-hmm.
couple years ago with Andy Dalton starting, like we kept it close for most of the game. And I feel like our team has evolved and gotten a lot better where I don't know if I'd necessarily say the same about the Cincinnati Bengals. And so if you want to talk about a revenge game, something that could go down to the wire where it's two former first overall picks kind of trading blow for blow in the fourth quarter as you're trying to find the edge and pull away and win. I think the defense on our end is going to have a lot to prove after kind of being hit in the mouth the last go round these two teams last time these two teams faced. And then for the Panthers, I think Bryce Young being at the helm, being down the stretch at home in front of the home crowd, I think he has what it takes to put together like that game winning drive. And even if it's not the one that wins it, like we saw in the wild card weekend, he's somebody where it's nails at the end of a game to where you know it can go back and forth, and you want him on your side.
He's the Carolina Reaper. He had all those clutch wins. I think the most fourth quarter comebacks or fourth quarter game winning drives through 3 years in his career. Um, I would say the only thing about Cincinnati is they brought in a ton of defensive talent this year. And so it's not going to be, as Steve Smith would put it, Jags out there. They're going to have real players. Dexter Lawrence is a real player. Boye Mafe just won a Super Bowl with the Steelers. They brought in, I believe, from Kansas City, Brian Cook, the safety. And they have some young defensive players that I think if they have real veterans, they don't have to rely on their young draft picks to be stars. I think they can be complementary players like Shamar Stewart, Miles Murphy. They're two young linebackers that they drafted last year. So I would say that their defense should be improved, but I think that will be a close game.
For me, and we talked about this off air a while ago, they are a Dexter Lawrence injury away from still remaining bottom of the barrel. And like obviously, like you're expecting Dexter Lawrence to be the force he's been in New York, but I mean, you look at that defensive line. I know Boye Mafe, he's a excellent signing, but it's like you drafted Cassius Howell. You're expecting Shamar Stewart to take a step in year two, Miles Murphy to continue to look like he was last year. Like it could happen, but it's you're banking on a lot of what ifs, especially with like a signing like Jonathan Allen, who didn't play a lot with the Minnesota Vikings last year. So again, it's all these pieces where you're already thin as is, and one or two injuries I think could make the defense look just as bad as it has the past couple of years. So moving on, I will leave this last superlative kind of up to you. We've already talked about the Falcons. I alluded to the Saints being like down to the wire game in New Orleans. Who in the division do you think the Panthers would most likely sweep or be swept by over the course of the season? So we swept the Falcons last year and got swept by the Saints last year. So kind of a one for one, if you will. Is there another scenario where that plays out exactly like we saw, or is there a little bit change of scenery?
I think Carolina could sweep the Falcons again. I'm not too I'm not too worried about Michael Penix and Tua Tagovailoa. I know Kevin Stefanski is the coach now, but he has not produced a ton of hype as an offensive play caller in the last couple of years. He's had his own quarterback issues, but Tua and Penix don't really alleviate that. As far as being swept, I know the Saints won both games last year. I kind of feel like both of them were kind of fluky wins. The game you and I were at in the Carolina game, I think that was just a bad game plan after the first drive. And then the game in New Orleans, you have to remember that was Tyler Shuck faking an injury after he got a little love tap while sliding, and that gave them an easy field goal to win. Dishonorable, a little bit dishonorable, but I would think that if there's another team that's going to sweep us in the division this year, I'd probably go Saints again, just because I'm a fan of Kellen Moore. I think he improves the overall play on his team. Like the sum of the parts are better than the actual parts. But hopefully, no team sweep us this year. I would think that Carolina knows that the importance of those games this season, right? So if there's a team that's going to do it, I would say the Saints again, but I don't think anybody sweeps the Panthers this year.
I feel that. I'm gonna go a different route just because I think the Todd Bowles era in Tampa Bay is kind of coming to a close. I think we're able to pull out the first meeting, and it should be a good game. It's right after that like trip to Philadelphia playing the Eagles. I think if we win that 1 o'clock game, going into Tampa on a Monday night football in Week 12, like I think that's the perfect way to kind of, so to speak, like end that chapter. And I think no
Yeah.
better way to do it than close the door on the team that's kind of been beating up on you the past several years to now flipping that script and taking advantage of it. So I think anything where the change, like that is the one where I feel like that's a way to just have a coach fired in season. It's pretty much lose out hope for winning, and that being kind of the nail in the coffin. So I think you look at the Carolina Reaper and what he's been able to do, and the pain the Bucks have been the past several years. I think that's the one I have circled as being the team that we sweep in the division.
Well, and that second Bucks game in Raymond James Stadium, Week 12, is a Monday night football game too. So, what better way to exercise the Buccaneers completely? Because we already won the division last year, but to completely get rid of them than on Monday Night Football, right? The last time it was a semi primetime game in Tampa Bay, they needed a ton of help from some very, very iffy calls to win that game. So maybe if those calls don't happen this time, Carolina does get the sweep.
I think that leaves only one more section to kind of cover as we're wrapping up here, and that's like season predictions. Tell me, how do you think the season goes overall? Do you think the Panthers win the division, sneak into the playoffs? Do we just miss out? This was something I think we talked about a little bit off air. Is that you looked at the schedule and it's a little bit of a gut punch. It's not as easy or smooth sailing as last year may have been. Are there more than 8 wins in the Panthers' future, in your opinion?
So I'm going to get into my take with this, but the way I look at the schedule is in three distinct blocks. Obviously, before the bye week, you have 4 games. 2 are at home against semi tough opponents, and then there's 2 road games which the Carolina should be able to take home. The final 5 games of the season, you have 4 home games and 1 road game, and that road game is the Steelers, who we talked about. Maybe Carolina would be favored at that point. The real gauntlet of the season to me is week 6, Philadelphia, through week 13, Minnesota. That's an 8 game stretch where Carolina is at home 3 times, and those 3 games are Tampa Bay, Denver, and Baltimore. A ton of road games in between there. So I think if Carolina can manage that middle stretch, like maybe not go 0-8, and then take care of business in the first and last stretch of the year, I think, and this is going to be my take, Carolina will have a positive record for the first time since 2017. I'm kind of looking at 9-8 right now is my prediction. I know that might be disappointing to some fans who want us to take the next step, right? Bryce Young has doubled his wins every year. The Dave Canales era has improved by 3 wins every year. But we had a lot of fluke wins last year and some blowouts. I would be cool with 9-8 with no more blowouts, and our point differential starts to be in the positives, right? Because we're a team that should be winning games, and we take the games that we shouldn't be winning and we make them close, or we pull off an upset. That's kind of what I'm looking at. And I think if you get 9-8 out of this year with another division win, I think that's a huge step in the right direction.
That's definitely huge, especially when you consider the past 2 years. I think you can definitely claim the Panthers have overperformed. Like even
Absolutely.
last year, when you go 8-9 and you do make the playoffs and you're really close to 9-8 had you pulled off a couple more games, like we had a negative point differential. Like
Hmm.
that's kind of crazy to think about. So I think being 9-8, but also like having a positive point differential, winning the games you're supposed to, splitting the ones that you aren't supposed to, is how you're going to find yourself 9-10 wins at the end of the season. And again, it's the NFC South. This isn't the most like dominant division in football. You don't need to win 10 plus games to win the division. And sometimes just winning the games you're supposed to are going to put you on the path where you're supposed to be. For me, you look at like before the bye week, there should be like 2 or so wins there. And it's like if you can get to your bye week at 500, maybe you're able to pull off 3. Then when you're going into that gauntlet, we're saying like week 6 through 13, it's like you come in out of that stretch like 500 or a little bit under, you feel so much more confident because at that point it's like, hey, we've won 6 or 7 games. We just need to tighten up and win a few down the stretch. Like you said, 4 out of your last 5 games are at home. Like go 3-2 during that stretch, and you should be walking into the playoffs. So it's just that idea. And John Fox and I know his staff used to take it month by month. Like, hey, our goal every month is to go kind of like 3-1 and find where those wins are and how we can be strategic about like putting our eggs in certain baskets. And I think it can be done. I think it can be done. And so I think I don't want to take your take, but I'll say this, that I think the Panthers will repeat as NFC South winners. Regardless of what that looks like, that could be 9, that could be 10, that could be 11 wins. I think the Panthers win back to back NFC South crowns. I think this team has just gotten too good from a roster standpoint, barring some major injuries, to take a step backwards after last year. Like, I don't feel like the Saints got necessarily that much better. I feel like the Falcons regressed a little bit. You can say the same thing about the Buccaneers. And so I feel like they're chasing us rather than us chasing them for the first time in quite a long time.
I think that's a good point because right now, with all the additions over the past couple free agencies and drafts, the roster isn't bad anymore. I don't think over the last couple of years, I've thought Carolina's roster has been bottom five, and I don't view it that way anymore. To me, it's closer to the middle of the pack, if not on the other. Like, if we see real Bryce Young improvement or like real Jalen Coker viable wide receiver two, stuff like that, then to me, we're on the plus side of 16th or whatever you would call average in the NFL. So I think you put it in a good light, even though the betting books, Vegas may not favor us to be the winner in the division. When I look at every one of these rosters, I think Carolina should be the team the people are chasing. And we won the division last year. So we should be the team people are chasing. So I like that. I think that 9-8 will get you there again. Tampa again started 6-2 last year, then just floundered. So we might have to win 10 games to win the division, but I think 9-8 will get you there, and that's kind of what I'm looking at. Hopefully Carolina can get to 10 or 11 wins. We'll see. Do you, lastly, do you have any thoughts on the home opener versus Chicago?
You see, here's the thing. If I start talking, I'm going to get myself in trouble. But with that,
I
there's a lot riding on it. We didn't do like a superlative that I was like, I did say, like, threw it out there, like, hey, what game is going to go down to the wire? Like, for me, that's the one I'm going to be biting my nails, because like the
Yeah,
Bears typically aren't a good team through the first 3 quarters. So there's a strong likelihood the Panthers, like, opening week, like, we're somehow have a lead in the fourth quarter, and then we got to deal with the voodoo that comes out of Chicago. So I I want to say we pull it off. If we pull it off, I have a lot of bragging rights for the rest of the year. I can breathe easily. But if we lose, it could be a long regular season for me.
yeah, that one in Detroit are the ones I'm looking forward to the most right now. But I think until then and until next week, you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Twitter, YouTube, wherever you get your content. Last week we talked about some of our hits and misses within the post 100 picks of the Carolina Panthers draft history. I think next week we'll talk about some of our hits within the top 100 picks. And obviously, we're not going to include Cam Newton and Luke Kuechly because that'd be too easy. So we're gonna have a set of rules to make it just a little bit more obscure outside of the Mount Rushmore of Carolina Panthers. But until then, for myself and Steven, keep pounding.